Hey everybody, Home/Henry here, and today's video at long last marks the return of my Shadow Hyper Beam Mewtwo to the channel. Now Mewtwo has a variety of potential movesets that it can run. Legacy Psystrike, always a must. Some people will opt for Legacy Shadow Ball, Ice Beam, or Focus Blast. I decided to use a second Elite TM to get Hyper Beam. Now this is not something that I would recommend doing. However, the damage output is truly hilarious. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. Let's take a look at a 9-5 run back onto the global leaderboards with Shadow Hyper Beam Mewtwo. Tough lead in the first match, Palkia Origin into Dialga Origin. I save switch into Zacian. My opponent chooses to stay in with the Dialga, so they don't have a great response to a Zacian up energy. The Play Rough gets no shielded, they go for the Iron Head, and here I make a massive mistake by no shielding. What I should try and do, considering I have a Shadow Hyper Beam Mewtwo in the back, is commit shields, try and force shields from my opponent, because if I can get shields down, then Hyper Beam is going to inflict massive damage. But instead, I no shield the Iron Head, I get farmed down, and their Zacian is going to be able to make 2 charge attacks before I can even make 1 Aqua Tail on the Palkia. So far, the execution of the strategy is not off to a great start by me, as they're going to be able to make it to a Wild Charge or a Close Combat. I decide I am fully committing to the Shadow Mewtwo. They're debuffed. I'm looking for the Psycho Cut farm down, but it's not to be. They're able to make 1 final Wild Charge before they get knocked out. I'm able to get the Psycho Cut farm down. We know they have the Dialga. In the back, it's Xerneas. They try for a catch onto Dialga. I'm going to farm up close to 100 energy and go for the Psystrike. Psystrike gets them low. I get the Psycho Cut farm down. They have 2 shields remaining. I have so much energy. This comes down to a game of baits. I bait the Psystrike. I get the shield. Opponent is going to fire off the Moonblast, and I'm forced to burn my final shield. It all comes down to this. I decide, you know what? I'm full sending the Hyper Beam. Do they respect the damage? They do not. Down goes Xerneas, getting KO'd with the shield remaining, and that's a good game. We're greeted with same leads in the next match, Palkia Origin versus Dialga Origin. I save switch into Zacian. This time my opponent is going to send in Landorus. This is very okay. They go for the Sandsear Storm. Not too concerned about that. I'm going to look to overfarm and go for the Play Rough. This has been debuffed. My opponent can very comfortably no shield here, and that's exactly what they're going to do. They do need to go for a Stone Edge if they want to pick up a knockout. I decide to commit the shield, as again, last game I didn't do a good job of getting shields down, so this time I'm going to try and do a bit better. So I will fire off the Wild Charge. That does get the shield from my opponent, and now, at the very least, I've gotten it into the ones. Sandsear will pick up the KO. I send in the Palkia. Palkia is able to get the farm down. Back in comes the Dialga. I'll be able to make it to a Spatial Rend, and Spatial Rend will do a solid amount of damage, so I'm hoping they shield. They actually no shield. That works as well. I'm going to stay in with the Palkia, force them to throw energy, and then it's Shadow Mewtwo time. In comes the Shadow Mewtwo in the back. It's a Kyogre. Kyogre can pretty comfortably live a Shadow Psystrike. But you know what they're not going to appreciate? Shadow Hyper Beam, nearly picking up the 1-hit KO on Kyogre. I'm forced to shield the serve, and now it all comes down to this. Can I Psycho Cut down before they Dragon Breath down? The Dialga lives on 1 HP, but the 1 Dragon Breath from the Palkia goes first, and I'm able to take that game. Moving to the next match, leading Palkia into Mewtwo. This is technically a positive matchup for Palkia. Palkia does win all even shield scenarios, but to win the zeros, you have to land a Spatial Rend. And if Mewtwo shields a Spatial Rend, then the shielded scenarios can get a bit interesting. So I will go for the Aqua Tail bait, expecting the shield. They call the bait, they try and snipe with a Dragonite safe switch, and that immediately gets punished by Zacian. Zacian going for the Play Rough. This should just be goodbye to the Dragonite. Dragonite shielding suddenly makes me worried. The only reason you ever shield there is if you have a move that can do damage, so I'm going to shield against a potential Hurricane or a return, and it does end up being a Hurricane. I'm going to overfarm quite a bit. I think this is pretty close to Wild Charge range, so I will go for the Wild Charge. They commit the shield, but they're unable to get their Hurricane, not the fastest move to get to on Dragonite, and they lose switch advantage and their shields. In the back, it is Dialga. Dialga will be met with the Play Rough. Play Rough will do some very nice damage, and then I have the ability to switch out and send in the Mewtwo. Unfortunately, in this game, I don't think Hyper Beam is going to be needed. They full send the Roar of Time. I can go for the Psystrike to pick up the knockout, and their Mewtwo does have a charge attack loaded, but it's just too low. They can farm up 2 Psycho Cuts, but I can very comfortably Dragon Breath down with the Palkia. Although, come to think of it, I actually think I have an Aqua Tail stored on there. I'm pretty low, but I do have the Aqua Tail stored from earlier, so we are going to be able to take the win. Unfortunately, not able to Hyper Beam anything in that match, but hey, a win's a win. Hopping into the next match, we see a terrific lead Palkia into Ho-Oh. Opponent should look to immediately switch out of here. In comes Dialga Origin, and I respond with Zacian. This matchup is made slightly more awkward due to the fact that I'm not running close combat, but I do think that Quick Attack, Wild Charge, and Play Rough is just the objectively correct moveset to run on Zacian for this current meta. If you don't have Play Rough and you're on Wild Charge and close combat, there's a very real possibility that your Zacian ends up losing to stuff like Palkia, which as a Fairy type, losing to a Dragon type is pretty inexcusable. So Play Rough feels like a must, and Wild Charge's flexibility if you get stuck against Ho-Oh is very, very nice. In this instance, unfortunately, I am going to be losing switch advantage, but I was able to get a shield down, so it can set up a potential Hyper Beam. In the back, oh no, they have Primarina. In comes the Mewtwo. They're going to send in Ho-Oh. No baits here. This is the one win con. Going for the Hyper Beam into the Ho-Oh. It connects. Can't quite pick up the one shot, but that is a monster amount of damage. I will commit the shield as they go for the Sacred Fire and get the farm down. I did get debuffed. In comes the Primarina. If I can make a second Psystrike, I have a chance to win this game. The Psystrike gets shielded. Primarina unable to KO with the charm. I get the Psystrike. Psystrike is going to get them low, and I have the Aqua Tail stored from earlier by farming down the Dialga. And Palkia flips the script and gets the win, KOing one of its hardest counters in Primarina. We see same leads in the next match, and that's great news for me. Opponent save switches into Zacian, and I'm going to respond with my own. I'm down energy, but I am best buddy, so I will win every CMP time. My opponent farms well past 100 energy, which tells me that they do not have Play Rough. The only reason to overfarm like that is if you're on Wild Charge close combat and you have to wait to take the damage before debuffing yourself. But bad news, they're not getting that second Wild Charge. I have the best buddy boost equipped, so I guarantee win CMP over other non-best buddy Zacian. My opponent sends in Dialga. I try and go for the Play Rough, but my greed costs me. And now they have a massive energy head start on the Dialga. I'm going to be shielding everything. Opponent goes for a Roar of Time, which is very unexpected. You almost never see Dialga go for anything in this matchup that isn't an Iron Head, but they actually full send it, and shielding that may potentially help me get back in this game. I continue to farm, go for the Psystrike. That felt like it might have been a charge attack priority tie, and it was. Okay, I think I have to let this go. As much as I want to Hyper Beam something, this game has to be won by Palkia. They're not in a range where Aqua Tail can KO, and I need residual energy to make a Spatial Rend versus the Dialga. So I'm going to Spatial Rend the Ho-Oh as it does more than an Aqua Tail. They're always going to Sacred Fire here, try and fish for the debuff, but I have to shield it, as I need to preserve HP because I'm going to be taking a lot of damage from this Dialga. Back in comes the Dialga. They did get the debuff on the Sacred Fire, so the Spatial Rend will not KO, but the Palkia gets the farm down. Things got a little rough, but we are able to take that game. Moving to the next match, we see a terrible lead, leading Palkia into Zacian. I'm going to save switch into my own Zacian. My opponent is just going to go for a Wild Charge and dip strategy. I decide to no shield. Wild Charge is going to do some solid damage. They send in Landorus, and I will go for the Play Rough before my opponent is able to make it to a Sandsear Storm. Play Rough connects. That does some very nice damage. Landorus continuing to farm. I decide to commit the shield. A Sandsear could potentially knock me out. Oh, they actually go for the Stone Edge to try and guarantee the knockout there. As Sandsear, it would have been really close. So they go for the Stone Edge to try and guarantee the knockout. But as we've seen a couple times, I'm more than happy to try and give up a shield to force a shield back, because the fewer shields my opponent has, then the easier it's going to be to Hyper Beam things. They're going to be sending back in the Zacian, and I'm going to be looking to switch out. I send in the Mewtwo, and it's Palkia in the back. Palkia can survive a Psystrike, but you know what they can't survive? A Hyper Beam. I go for the Hyper Beam. They shield it! You've got to be kidding me! Oh no, that's absolutely awful. I commit the shield as they go for the Aqua Tail, but I think at this point, I just don't have a win con in this match. They actually respected the Hyper Beam. I mean, to be fair, a Psystrike does a massive amount of damage, but still, that Hyper Beam, that thing would have just been gone. But now, I just get play roughed, and I don't really see a way forward in this game, but my opponent doesn't throw their energy. Are they running Wild Charge in close combat? Because if they are, that moveset choice just lost them the game. And they still have not thrown, so they must be running Wild Charge. They're trying to double up on Wild Charges, but I get them to 1 HP, I get the Dragon Breath through, so they're not going to be able to get any other charge attacks. That right there is why I think Play Rough is mandatory on Zacian, because losing as a Zacian to a Palkia is a terrible feeling. In the next match, we see a great lead, leading Palkia into Landorus. They're going to go for the Sandsear Storm. They're actually staying in this matchup, and I will fire off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail doesn't knock out, but I will be able to farm down before they make a Stone Edge. In this instance, my opponent was actually slightly under-leveled on the Landorus, which is a bit of a surprise to see at leaderboard elo. My opponent, oh no, they try and make a catch, but they've given Zacian so much energy to just absolutely shred this Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh goes for the Brave Bird as soon as they get it. They're just looking to force a shield. I will commit the shield. I'm going to fire off this Wild Charge. I only throw one in the move because I don't want to take that Incinerate damage, but my opponent does end up shielding, so the Incinerate damage does register. I go for Wild Charge number 2. This they will let through, and I'm going to pivot back into the Palkia. They fire off their energy, and that's very okay with me. Ironhead, not going to KO. I'm not able to make the Spatial Rend, but even an Aqua Tail at this point will just get this closer to Psystrike range. We are very, very close to Shadow Psystrike range. I would love to be able to Hyper Beam, but I think with the amount of energy the Dialga has, I don't think I'm going to be able to Hyper Beam and win this game. The Psystrike does get shielded. It is a CMP tie. I'm going to shield myself, and we've already landed a couple Hyper Beams, but I think I'm just going to have to take the win the boring way and go for the Psystrike. I had lost count, and I was a little worried that if I tried to go for the beam, I would end up losing. So we do end up taking the win, but unfortunately, no beams to be seen. We've got mirror leads in the next match, Palkia versus Palkia. I like to build up to the Spatial Rend, switch into the Zacian, and end up catching that Spatial Rend where it is going to be double resisted. If you're running a Palkia Origin team with a Fairy in the back, that's how I really recommend playing it, as it ends up being a really comfortable play pattern, as opponents almost feel like they have to throw there, because if they don't, then they're going to have to go down a shield and potentially risk getting Spatial Rended. So I'm able to save a ton of energy on my Palkia while I'm able to waste theirs, and now they send in the Landorus. Landorus, this is very okay. I'm actually able to pick up the knockout with the Play Rough. They choose not to save the Landorus whatsoever, and they send in Solgaleo, and this is a problem. Solgaleo, unfortunately, is a complete wall to my Mewtwo's moveset because I'm not running a standard moveset like Shadow Ball. This Psychic Fangs is not going to knock out, but what they're going to do here is switch into the Palkia as I fire off the Aqua Tail. Very nice situational awareness there by my opponent. I'm able to get the farm down, but unfortunately, all that's going to do is just give more farm to the Solgaleo. This is very comfortably in Shadow Ball range, but I don't have Shadow Ball. So this does get a bit tricky. I'm going to send in the Mewtwo. My opponent probably just going to start firing off these Psychic Fangs, just trying to ramp up the damage as much as they possibly can. I farm up to a potential Hyper Beam, and I am going to be firing off the Psystrike. The Psystrike is double resisted, but my opponent does give me the shield. And now, if I can get the final shield by building up to a potential Shadow Ball, which I do, then this should just be a win, because I think I can make a Wild Charge with the Zacian. Go for the Psystrike. My opponent calls the Psystrike, and any win con is just immediately out the window. Oh, that is extremely rough. And there we see the downside of Hyper Beam is unfortunately stuck against the Steel type. There's not a whole lot I can do. Hopping into the final match, we see the Dream lead leading Palkia Origin into Kyogre. The Lugia save switch is going to be answered by Zacian. Zacian farming up a massive amount of energy. I do survive an Aeroblast, but I do elect to shield, and there's a very important reason for that, and that's because my opponent has no way of doing fast move damage to me in this matchup. So as long as I overfarm properly, I should be able to make it to quite a few charge attacks versus that Shadow Kyogre. And Wild Charge, I mean, regular Kyogre can tank it, but Shadow Kyogre, I think it's going to come really close to one-shotting. My defense has been harshly debuffed by the back-to-back Wild Charges, so these Shadow Waterfalls are adding up. They're going to shield the Wild Charge. Zacian able to hang on and make yet another Wild Charge. They have a choice to make. They let it go, and it nearly one-shots. In the back, they have Dialga Origin, and this should just be a win. I'm going to fire off the Spatial Rend. Spatial Rend does get shielded, and now, unfortunately, this is not quite Hyper Beam range. I think maybe Hyper Beam plus a farm down, but is really risky, and I do decide, unfortunately, to go for the guaranteed win con. I really thought about beaming there, but I was like, man, if I beam and then get farmed down, I'm going to be pretty sad. So I end up going for the Psy Strikes there. In hindsight, I think I could have beamed and then still won. But regardless, we are able to take the win. All in all, I had a massive amount of fun getting to run the Shadow Hyper Beam Mewtwo again. I will say, do I recommend TMing your Mewtwo over to Hyper Beam? No. Hyper Beam is definitely more of a meme move where it can catch a lot of battlers, specifically at higher elo, off guard, because in a lot of situations they're thinking, oh, 2 Psy Strikes will KO here, so I'm just going to no shield the first. But what they don't know is I have used one of the most absurd uses of an Elite TM possible and put Hyper Beam on the Shadow Mewtwo, and I can actually pick up a one-hit KO on stuff like Zacian. So, for your own Shadow Mewtwo, I definitely recommend something like the more classic Double Legacy, Psy Strike, and Shadow Ball, or if you still want to have moveset flexibility, you could run something like Ice Beam or Focus Blast as the secondary charge attack. But overall, Shadow Hyper Beam on Mewtwo, a lot of fun, but not an experiment that I would recommend replicating. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been Home Slice Henry.